Hello again and welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for being here today. And if it's your first time, a real warm welcome. The last video that I made was about how I left fundamentalism. And some people may have gotten the impression that I had a huge crisis of faith, that I don't believe in God, that I left the whole concept of Christianity or Judaism or any of the religions that my faith had been built on behind. And rest assured, what I did was none of those things. What I did was I left behind the way fundamentalism interprets the Bible. That's what I saw as they were doing it incorrectly, in my opinion. And so I'm still a God follower. I still have Bibles that I quote from, and I still follow the path that has been forged by the Christian mystics over the centuries, and I call it a devotional path. However, I realize fully that you may do things slightly differently, and I'm not here to change anybody's beliefs, to fix you, to make you see things the way I do. What I'm trying to do is have all of us open to the divine, regardless of where we are right now. We all begin right now, today, where we are. And so I just ask for a divine blessing upon everyone. And today I want to talk about sacred scriptures. And so the first thing I'm going to do to talk about that is to share with you from the Oxford Language Writings the definition of the word sacred. So before I say anything further about sacred text and the sacred scriptures of Christianity and Judaism, let me take a good look at the word from the Oxford Language Dictionary. So the word sacred is connected with God or the gods, or dedicated to a religious purpose and so deserving veneration. For example, in the phrase sacred rites. Similar words would be holy, hallowed, blessed, consecrated, sanctified, and dedicated. It also means religious rather than secular, in the phrase sacred music, for example. And we could say it's religious music or spiritual music or ecclesiastical music. Now, when it comes to writing or the text, it is embodying the laws or doctrines of a religion or spiritual movement. So you could say a sacred Hindu text or a sacred Christian text. Another definition, regarded with great respect and reverence by a particular religion, group, or individual. I might consider something sacred that another person or a person in another group would not. Example here is an animal sacred to Mexican culture, or an animal sacred to Indian culture. I'm going to stop this screen showing right here, and let's talk some more about the sacred texts of Christianity. with that as a basis, let me talk a little bit about the idea of sacred scripture. Now, in the definitions, you saw that when it comes to a text, the text is usually sharing the laws or rules of a faith and the various beliefs. I want to say a little bit more about that in just a minute. But first, let me say, what kinds of things do we identify with being sacred? Of course, if you are a believer in God or in the Holy One, in the source of all, I want to say it as many ways as I can so that you realize that this is something big that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the highest power, and that is what we would call sacred. And for people who follow the Lord, that deity is sacred. But there are other things that we consider sacred, and they are things that are set apart by humans as sacred. Buildings, for example. Certain buildings are designated as sacred buildings, and those are usually churches, mosques, synagogues, cathedrals, temples, buildings where people go to pray or worship or connect with the deity. And so the building is usually, in most religions, set aside or set apart during a particular ceremony or ritual, maybe a dedication of the building to sacred purpose. And if there comes a time when that building is no longer going to be used for a sacred purpose, then usually, not always, but usually there's a ceremony to deconsecrate the building. There are also just spaces that are considered sacred. In the Native American religions, there are certain mountains or hillsides that are considered sacred land. Perhaps because that is where they go to meet the ancestors or speak with the ancestors. And in Israel, around Jerusalem, there are many areas that by Jews, Muslims, and Christians are considered sacred for various reasons, because something important in the religion happened there. So that's considered a sacred site. That are considered sacred. The objects that were used in the Bible, in the Old Testament, in the sanctuary for worship of the God, were dedicated to that purpose. They were made for that purpose and dedicated for that purpose, and they weren't used for something else. And we have objects in our places of worship today that are dedicated, and usually by a ritual of some kind, prayers or blessings said over them, and they will henceforth be considered, they're still considered objects. And if they're bowls or dishes or cups, they get washed just like all the other things, but they are considered set aside consecrated. Another special place that is considered consecrated are some cemeteries. We say when a person of a particular religion is buried in the cemetery of that religion, they're buried on consecrated ground. And it is a privilege to be buried on consecrated ground. In some faiths, some branches of Christianity, if someone has committed what is considered a mortal sin, then they're not buried on consecrated ground, but have to be buried outside of that cemetery. So all of those things are, for one reason or another, considered to be sacred. And so they're honored or venerated by people. In the Orthodox religion, there are icons, pictures of Jesus and Mary and various saints, and they're venerated. In Catholicism, there are also pictures, but there are statues, and very often these statues are honored in some way. Now, neither icons or statues are worshipped as though they were gods, but they've been set aside to illustrate something about the faith, so they're given a certain amount of honor. Here again, individuals are venerated in the Orthodox, the Episcopal, the Catholic religion, the Roman Catholic religion, and they're called saints. And these are people who have died, and there are miracles associated with that person, both while they were living and in answer to prayer today. And the person is made a saint. They're not worshipped, but they're not considered a celestial being. They're not angels or gods of any kind, but they are the good people, the best people who have gone on before in that particular faith. So you see what different religious organizations and different groups might honor might be different than the group that you're in. But setting something aside as sacred, that's what that means. We give it honor because it represents something about a deity or strong faith. I saw jokingly that certain, and I can't remember exactly what it is because I'm not a big sports fan, but certain stadiums are considered sacred places by the fans of particular sports teams. And I guess for some, sports can be a spiritual exercise, and it has all the rules and sacred places of a religion. I guess that's a topic for some other time. Let me talk now about this sacred text, the writing of the Bible, and why is it considered sacred? Well, I think there are two primary reasons. The first one being that it was written, the people who wrote the Bible had a specific purpose in mind for their words, and it had to do with their religion. So it's a religious text, and more about how they wrote it in a minute. Once it was assembled so that all of the books that were going to be included were chosen, and it was, put together, and a title was put on it, Holy Bible. It was recognized as sacred writings by the members of that religion. And other religions have other scriptures, other writings that they consider sacred. Let me add one more thing about that. In Christianity, not all of the various divisions use exactly the same Bible. Some include different books than others, different texts than others. Some include the books of Enoch. Though that's a rare group that would include that, but some include that. Some include what's called the Apocrypha, and that is not in all Bibles. So even the sacred book is not the same in all branches of the religion. So anyway, to go on to the second thing is that this book has stood the test of time, and multiple people over the ages have read it, have been inspired by what they read, have followed the teachings of the Bible and believed that it made their life a better life, made them better people. They believed the promises that they found in the scriptures, and they were, in fact, faithful and good people, and this Bible did help them. So the writings are helpful to people. Now, the reasons for the different sections, or the reasons the different authors wrote, differ. Some of what's included in the Bible is history. It tells the stories of the various important people like Moses and Elijah, Abraham, Isaiah, Jesus, Peter, Paul. It gives us at least some information about their lives and spends a lot of time on their teachings. Some of the writings are actually written by the person that has the name, like the book of Isaiah. Part of that book was written by Isaiah, the first Isaiah, and then sections were written by disciples of him. Jesus didn't write anything himself, but his disciples wanted to put his life history in it as they saw it, and as many quotes from him as they could, so they wrote them down in a text. Some of the Old Testament is a recording of the oral tradition that was handed down, and eventually someone decided to write, for example, the book of Genesis and Exodus. Those had been stories, like the creation stories and the tales of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, had been handed down orally, and they were written down. There are songs and poems that people used that were written in the Bible. And then there were great prophets, great teachers, and so their words were written down. A lot of times the person doing the writing had a specific group, individual, or purpose. For example, the book of Timothy was written to an individual man named Timothy. And the book of Corinthians was a letter written to a church in the city of Corinth. The Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were written by unknown authors and were given those designations, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, to record the stories that were told about Jesus and any information about him as they could find. All of that being said, then it's obvious that there's going to be some good stuff in this book. And the church venerates this book as sacred, meaning it's the most important literature in the church. And they put no other book at the same level as this one as far as wisdom. This is wisdom literature, and it is spiritual. Now, my opinion is, the way I look at the scriptures, the sacred scriptures, is that it is wisdom literature and it is spiritual literature. I do not believe it's science literature, or that it's history, or that it's like a newspaper today where everything has to be, everything is supposed to be accurately reported. That wasn't the purpose, and so I still consider this very important literature. I consider this, as far as a Jew or a Christian is concerned, the most important literature that you have. It was written by serious, religious, holy scholars of the faith for the benefit of readers. Because these people had different points of view, and we come to the reading of the scripture from different points of view, and I see that wisdom always has layer upon layer of wisdom. I don't agree with everyone's interpretation. You can't possibly agree with everyone's interpretation. So I think that this will help to clarify at least my point of view about sacred scripture. So the short answer is yes, I think that scriptures are sacred to the group that they were written about and written for. Do I believe that there is now, in the 21st century, possible spiritual direction and communion with the divine other than reading the Bible? Absolutely. And that's why I'm sharing with you on this channel all of those different ways of communing with the divine, opening our hearts to hear from God. So I hope that you'll be continue to be subscribers and viewers of these videos, and take from them what you will, take from them what is helpful to you, and be open to trying new things in your spiritual life today. I'll see you again real soon. Bye-bye for today.